Welcome to Eddie's Launchpads, the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Eddie and Captain Dave have another great guest, so sit back and enjoy the show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Yes, welcome back to the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Welcome wherever you're listening around the world, and particularly all those parents and carers who live in Peterborough. It's great that you're with us. Thank you for choosing Eddie's Launchpads. Now, I've got another guest for you today. His name is Paul Jenkins, and he's another children's poet. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Buongiorno, hello, welcome, bienvenue. I missed. There's a lot of people out there. I'm not sure I could do this.
I'm assuming all the people who do listen, when we look through the demographics, I'm assuming they all can at least speak some English. So that's great. Otherwise, it'll be a very boring podcast if you can't speak English, wouldn't it? But thanks for joining us today. It's wonderful. Before we get on to talk about your fantastic books, I've been on your website and had a look. Can I first ask you to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself?
It all started in 1978. A small boy was born in Basildon in Essex. And then I'll scoot forward about 30 years. I was... Essentially, I used to be a teacher. I used to be a head of drama in a high school. And I very much enjoyed my entire time as a teacher. I didn't enjoy being in education particularly, but I did enjoy my time working with the kids. And as a drama teacher, I was writing all the time because of the fact teaching GCSE, bluntly, was we had large groups of girls wanting to produce work. And we had plays that were entirely filled with men, as you know, as life has given us. And I found myself writing an awful lot. And I found my love of writing overtook my love of teaching. Left wanting to become a writer, thought I was going to become a playwright, ended up falling into poetry. That's taken me to all sorts of different places, including working with all sorts of different authors at places like EmpathyLab, which I'm going to really seriously talk about, the EmpathyLab festival that's coming up in the summer. And also working as a DJ, as a presenter, and working as a children's poet. But honestly, the best self-imposed job I think I've ever had in my entire life, and I'm thoroughly enjoying things. So yeah, there's the potted history of me. I live up in Lancashire, in Haslingden. Which is a beautiful little town, lots of history up here, beautiful views of the Pennine Hills, and I've got Manchester 20 minutes away in the other direction, so I get the nice mix of urban and rural all kind of packed in together. The inspiration, I often say, it's all about keeping your eyes and ears open. So it's making sure that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you take things in. And I've got countless stories of sitting on trains. I did actually witness love at first sight once on a train, and sat there scribbling about it in the corner of the carriage. But it's easy for me to get out. I'm a keen runner. I like to explore. I love getting lost in places that I've never been before. And there are so many places around here that despite having lived here for 25 years, you suddenly take a left turn and you go, I've never been to this bit before. I didn't know there was a shortcut here. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I found a wood. Excellent. You can find that, and nature plays an awfully large part in my writing. I love animals. We've got 2 cats, 2 dogs. If they don't interrupt this interview, I'd be highly surprised. And we've also got a hedgehog just moved into the garden as well. So that's certainly helping. In terms of a room, it's not a Rochdale shed. but it is. I'm sitting at the moment in what is called the Rainbow Room in our house, and the reason it's called the Rainbow Room is obviously you can't see the fine people of Peterborough and beyond, but there's rainbows everywhere. There's superheroes everywhere. There's fairy lights everywhere. It's if I could, I think this is basically I'm living in a series of primary colours, and it's. That's my thing. It's very much, it's big, it's bright, it's bold, it's beautiful. It gets everything going. I'm a sensory overload. That's what I've got.
Well, it sounds absolutely wonderful, and there's nothing wrong with primary colours, my friend, or rainbow colours. That's brilliant. Often the inspiration just comes along. I think it was Alan Bennett, wasn't it, who said that he would sit in the foyer of a hotel, and the play would be written around him. He'd sit there with a pot of tea. And he'd hear conversations going on around him like you on the train. And from that comes all of these wonderful characters we all know and love. It's incredible.
Well, absolutely. And that's what Mother said when I was sitting in the car on a roundabout on the A56. She was, we were eating peanut butter sandwiches.
That's it. That's right.
Sorry, you don't start me on Alan Bennett. That was my drama degree I did.
Right.
I directed Green Films by Alan Bennett, and I just immersed myself for that sort of period of the production. And the man's just a genius at tapping into those everyday phrases that people use. And that's that's what I mean by inspiration is you look around and the other artists and the poets and the book writers and everybody else. And I often say that we stand on the shoulders of giants and then quietly steal all their stuff. So we sort of build it up bit by bit, and we take inspiration from each other.
Yeah, of course. That's there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the same. I'm a musician, and the same thing is me. I take my inspiration from other great songwriters, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't copy their stuff, you're all right. You just get your inspiration from them. Mr. McCartney, if you're listening, I do not copy your work.
We all copy Mr. McCartney.
Well, yeah, we sing his songs, but we just have to be careful we don't sell them.
That's a good point.
Let's move on to your books, because you've got quite a wide range, and we might be lucky enough. You might want to share a little snippet of one or two of them, but because they're so extensive and they may be connected to particular age ranges, I'll let you describe and take us on a journey. Can you take us on a journey through your books?
I can, yeah. I mean, it's when I began writing books. This came out of doing some playwriting work and schools work. I was writing some play in a day work for a company, and they were asking for things, particularly though they had a lean on Shakespeare. So I said, well, if we're writing Shakespeare, we need to be writing in verse. And those pieces of verse that I started to create were becoming slightly more popular than my prose play work that I was doing. And so it sort of snowballed, and I ended up writing little short snippets for things. And I realized that I'd been writing for people in poetry form pretty much all my life. If you ask any of the kids that I used to teach what's in their leavers books, they all got a little personalized poem about the 5 years that we'd spent together. And I've realized that was having some traction. So I started to write. I then a chance conversation with, at the time, my 8-year-old son, sitting in the car, because we have all our great conversations in the car. And he said to me, oh, you're writing a book. And I said, yes, it's going to be for kids. And he went, oh, wow, who are you getting to illustrate it? And I said, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about that yet. I've barely written any of the poems. And he said, you should get a kid to illustrate it, because then it's a kid's book illustrated by kids, and it would really, really work well. And I was like, yeah, that's actually quite a good idea. Thank you, Thomas. Of which he went, I'm a kid. And I was like, hold on a minute. Listen. And he was angling.
Touting for business.
He was touting for business. And how on earth do you turn around to your own son at 8 years old and go, well, I don't want you to do it. So I said, right, okay, right. Well, here's one of the poems I've written. See what you can do with it. He shared that with me. I shared that with the wonderful world of the internet. And I got so many positive responses of that combination of kind of father and son working together. I said to him, well, okay, well, let's do this. Let's see if we can write another, few poems, and let's see if we write. And it became a thing. And it took us around about 6 months or so. and my bottom did a burp in class was born. And that was my first piece that then snowballed on to another 2 books, The Man in the Silly Hat and Wibbly Wobbly Words. They came together. We've brought those 3 collections together as the Bottom Burps trilogy now. And Thomas turns 18 in the summer. So it's now 10 years we've been working together. I dropped him off at college this morning and I said, I'm doing this podcast later. We're going to be talking about it. Are we going to work together again? And he went, if you want. So we're putting a good book together over the summer as well, and it's going to be great because his cartoon style that he's brought to the illustrations has really sort of come on, and he's developed it. He's now doing he's just finished his graphic design A level. He's just finished a games design BTEC as well, so he's going off to college to deal with all of that. And off to university next year, which makes me feel very, very old indeed. But yeah, that was the first book that we had, and I thought I'd share to start with. There's one of the poems, and you talked. We had a little preamble before we came on air. We were talking about nonsense in particular, and one of the chapters of the book is called Wibbly Wobbly Words, and I again. Going back to who we take inspiration from, I'll see if you can guess who I've taken inspiration from on this one, because it was a very much a stand on the shoulders of giants and steal all their stuff moment. Sometimes I talk in nonsense, and I'll talk in wobbly wibbles. I'll open up my mouth, but what comes out is bobbly bibbles. The people round me, they look around with unbelieving faces as I just waffle, squab and squib in open public places. And someone tried to stop me once from babbling round the town, but I just shouted loudly, nibble, nobble, dobble down. As it seems, my daffy wordage is a popper stopping wham, so maybe I could teach the world to be a bit more splam. Speaking wob in waffleage is really rather fun, and it's smiley-piley pibblage, and it's dibble, dobble, hum.
Wow.
So there you go.
There were times when it speaks of Lear. But at the same time, other more modern poets came into mind. Was there a particular person who drew your inspiration from?
Well, I tell you what, my bottom did a burp in class actually had thanks to Edward Lear and to Thomas at the front of it. So yes, it was. I mean, limericks are very much part of my kind of go-to. Yeah. I love rhyming. I'm a 95% rhyming poet when it comes to writing work. But yeah, it was that and a combination of Spike Milligan's On the Ning Nang Nong. Which was the first poem that I ever learned by rote when I was at school, and it stuck with me forever. And that idea of creating a world in our heads that doesn't exist. You know, there are monkeys that say boo and teapots that go jibber jaboo. That idea is we need that sense of fun and play in the words that we create, because otherwise, you know, you start off with a very, dull and, grammatical language with comprehension and inspiration and inference. And you go, oh, blimey, this makes it sound very dull to talk. And we don't have that. You go down the street and you talk to people. We don't talk in this monosyllabic, boring way. We talk in a happy way. We use colloquialisms. We use all sorts of different ways to communicate with each other that are more fun than what is written down in books a lot of the time. And sharing that out loud and encouraging kids to play with their words is one of the things that I fundamentally believe we need to be doing in schools, because that way you get those creative artists, you get people's imaginations running wild. They start to create stories from all sorts of different angles. I mean, if I asked you, for example, if I said, could you name me a colour?
Blue.
Go for it.
Blue.
Fantastic. Could you name me an animal?
A sheep.
A sheep. And could you name me an activity?
Going for a ride on a bus.
Going for a ride on a bus. Excellent. So we've now got a story about a blue sheep riding on a bus. And now in your head, you have that image of a blue sheep riding on a bus.
Yep.
And I would ask the kids, okay, right, so has this sheep got a name? They will inevitably call it Bob. I don't know why, but it seems that, all things that need a quick name are called Bob. And then we'll say, okay, so how did it become blue? And they go, well, either it fell in a pot of blue paint or it ate too many blueberries and you start to build up this world for this imaginary character that you can't shift out of your head. And of course, when we were doing that, you could have said to me an orange badger skateboarding, and then we'd have a completely different story and go off in a different direction. None of it makes any sense. And you know, there are some who may say, well, that's just nonsense. Brown bear eating porridge. Because if you say to me, brown bear eating porridge, you go, well, that's ridiculous. Brown bears don't eat porridge. Doing Goldilocks, and we've been telling that story for hundreds of years. So nonsense has its role and its place in what we're doing, and I will bang that drum until as many cows come home.
It's hard, isn't it, to pinpoint where that original style came from. You know, that the way that you construct it, and the language that's used. I mean, yes, Lear. Sometimes you know, think of Kipling. Rudyard Kipling used it from time to time in his poems, and I think it was Coleridge. I can't remember who wrote it now, but the other day I listened to Richard Burton, the late Richard Burton, the actor, reading that poem about in Xanadu the Kubla Khan, a pleasure dome decree. You know, and by the time he had finished it, I was there. You know, talking about this massive chasm in which, you know, there's and all these colours, and I sat listening to it, thinking, well, that just came out of nowhere, a bit like, you know, the sheep on the bus. It conjures up pictures in one's mind that just takes you on this journey that you never thought you'd ever go on. You know, I just thought, oh, it's Richard Burton, but before I knew where I was actually in Xanadu. You know, I mean, it's just incredible how poems take you on those journeys, and it's hard to work out, even if they are silly words. I mean, I remember distinctly asking my mum what a runcible spoon was.
Like many people, we all got stuck inside for a very long period of time, and you know, it's Shakespeare wrote King Lear. Lear seems to be coming up an awful lot this afternoon, but I got stuck in and had no access to my illustrator, so I started doodling. And that's where Doodles from My Noodle came from, which was my next book. And those ideas of just sort of, you know, that things just leaking out of your head. You know, we've all had it where we've been on the phone to somebody and you'll be picking up a pen and then suddenly you've drawn a spider and you go, oh, that's interesting. Or you might sort of like, oh, there's a brick wall and it's come together. And then suddenly you look at your page and you've got all these tiny little black and white drawings that have just appeared out of nowhere. And I think that the kind of imagination leaking out of your head. And I thought, well, you know, can poems alongside that put together a collection of 40 odd little things? It's a nice little pocket-sized book, this one as well. So it's one designed to fit in a school blazer if you need it. You know, if you want some secret poetry, you can carry it around with you. But there's all sorts of things, and they came out of things that I could see around the house. So, you know, the cat, for example. There's a poem called Cat on Head, which is aimed at our lovely little cat, Henry, who decides that at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's the perfect place to sleep is on my face. So she often gets herself in all sorts of sticky situations. So yeah, that was during that time. And then we came out the other side, and Thomas and I working together again. On my latest book, which is Bigger Than the Bullies, which is very much aimed at sort of children sort of in year 5 and 6 upwards. It's a slightly more complicated book. I wouldn't call it one of my adult collections. It's not got themes that people would not recognise from school, but it certainly leans back towards my experience of education in sort of year 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, when children can really struggle. My latest book is called Bigger Than the Bullies. Now, that is a story of a young lad called Harry. He's in year 5. And it's particularly a book about that tricky time trying to navigate your way through the end of primary school, the beginning of Key Stage 2 as well. It's sort of aimed at those sorts of kids. And it's a tricky one because Harry is doing fantastically at school in terms of he's great at maths, he's brilliant at as well as that, he's a great artist, he's fantastic at most things in school. Unfortunately for him, it shouldn't be a problem, but he is
statistically, somebody's got to be the biggest kid in school. He is the biggest kid in school, and that makes him a target for one of the other kids in the class, a young lad called Daniel, who managed to herald this other group of boys to really make Harry's life difficult. He's got all sorts of other things going on in his home and family life as well. And yeah, I managed to tell that story through my first verse novel. So which is a tricky thing in itself, 84 poems that follow a same narrative all the way through. Bigger Than the Bullies was born. And it's been a really interesting time because, this is not the nonsense poetry that I would have been creating from perhaps in my previous work. But this one is much more about telling that tale. There are some lovely moments in this book, though, that I really enjoy telling, particularly those moments you'll be pleased to know that Harry finds a resolution during the course of the book. Good. Particularly through a teaching assistant that arrives at the school for the first time. And it's the first time Harry's ever seen anybody that physically looks a little bit like him. And he connects with Miss Derbyshire quite nicely. She is described in a kind of comic book form at the beginning as the woman the size of a planet. She is, as Shakespeare once said in the comedy of errors, she is from head to foot as she is from hip to hip. She is spherical like a globe. She's a big lady, and her and Harry get along really, really well. They find a shared connection in their love of arts. And the piece I'm going to share is one of those more positive moments, and it's called Eyes. It's the moment that Harry first clocks that Miss Derbyshire has arrived. She's like me. She's like me. And they're all looking at her, staring, and they're not looking at me. Our eyes lock is a strange sensation. It's not. It can't be my imagination. Like a mirror that's 17 years older and a different gender and 40 centimetres taller and wearing dungarees with sunflowers all over them. Waving to someone, introducing with a smile, confident, dignified, all the while. What an entrance! In so many ways, she is immense. And that's what Brilliant. Miss Derbyshire does. She comes in, she transforms Harry's life just by being there. And he suddenly has this moment where he goes, I don't have to turn away from everybody. I've got someone that's like me, that we can stand side by side. Interestingly enough, Miss Derbyshire, Chris, as she is, she has similar issues to Harry with the staff, who are not necessarily as accepting of her as the kids are not necessarily as accepting of Harry as well. So it's hopefully a book that adults can connect with children particularly that are going through that kind of pre-adolescent phase, and indeed adults that have been through bullying themselves when they were at school. It's a big issue, and there's a paradox really that the thing that bullies pick on are differences. Whether that's because maybe they're not so intellectually up to speed like all the rest in the class. Maybe it's about their short-sightedness. Maybe it's about their figure. Maybe they're too thin. Maybe they're too big. Whatever it is, it's about let's pick on the difference. And yet, when you look at stories, the hero is always different to everyone else. Absolutely. And they're the ones that are put on a pedestal. Clint Eastwood in his Dirty Harry movies is totally different to everyone else. But nobody bullies him. I wouldn't want to anyway. But nobody bullies the hero because the hero is different. Yet in real life, if you're in a school, and particularly it happens at school, if you're slightly different in some way to someone else and you stand out in the crowd, that's when the bullies... Not always, but that's when they can pick on people. And that is why representation in books is so important, because if you see yourself, if you see those characters up on the, on that kind of big stage of being on a book, in a book, it makes a huge difference to how you feel and your place within the stories that we're telling. There was that horrible moment a few years back. Somebody took a photograph of the best-selling books for children. It was a branch of any branch of W.H. Smith somewhere. It was the chart, and then they said, this is what this looks like with all the male characters on it. And then they took out the male characters away from the top 50 books. And there were so few girls that were the heroes of those stories. And you look at that, and then you drill down even further into how many of those characters have differing abilities. You drill down even further to different races and ethnicities, and you start to realise that those marginalised people in our society are being reflected through the books and the stories we're telling. And I think, for me, it's really important. Even going back to the Bottomburps trilogy, there's a poem I wrote called "I Don't Like Pink," which is about a young girl who is bought nothing but pink clothes. But she said, I don't like pink. It doesn't make me smile. My mum says I'll grow into it, but it's taken me a while, as now I'm nearly 10 and still it feels quite strange wearing clothes I just don't like that much. I want a different range. She gets really upset by being packaged and told what she should be doing. And I think it's important we have those voices as writers, that we particularly for kids who can't necessarily, they don't have the platform to speak up for themselves yet. So actually listen to them, and give them the platform through the stories you're telling. I've worked with an amazing organisation called EmpathyLab. EmpathyLab, essentially, the research is that we when we're reading a story, our brain, almost like a flight simulator, we go through the motions with the characters. So when we read the emotions of the characters, we connect with those emotions physically. And it helps us to then, if we experience other people in real life, we then are able to replicate some of the things that the characters do. So, of course, the more you read about people from different cultures, more read about people with different abilities, the more you read about people like Harry, who's, a different shape and size to me, then you kind of think, well, actually, if we're meeting those people in real life, I've got that kind of frame of reference in my own head. And it helps you then to drive on through empathy into that kind of social action about how we change things. And it's an amazing, there's a lot of scientific research around it, obviously. At the Empathy Day Festival has so many authors attached. We've just done a lovely session. Myself, Carl Nova, Coral Rumble and Gian Shabani, sharing poems with each other, listening to each other, hearing each other's tales. And, Carl told us about his life growing up in Nigeria, for example, something I've never, I've not got any frame of reference for except through his book. The Curious Case of Carl Nova is a wonderful book. Gian was talking about she lives in Paris, but she has Iranian family. It's that's something that I can't kind of get to grips with, because I'm I was born in Essex and I live up in Lancashire. I'm a white male. I don't have the same frame of reference, but by listening and reading her stories, I get that understanding, and there's so many children's authors working in that way. I mean, some that are taking part in the Empathy Day Festival this year. Tom Percival's involved. Hannah Gold, who wrote the brilliant Finding Bear.
Yeah, she's been on the show. She's been on Launchpads.
Yeah, Hannah is an amazing. I've got this sign in my office just over in the corner that says, "One day you'll be somebody's favourite author," and I said, when I did speak to Hannah, I said, you're mine, because her books are just fantastic. They take you on such an amazing journey and inspire you to be an environmental campaigner. When I look at the world now, if I read Turtle Moon, I want to go out to Costa Rica. I don't want to save turtles. It really does make you think about the world. To the point where I've just written a small book for it's a tale of it's called The Tale of Donald T. Snail. It's been written for a local fostering agency, and they asked me to write a piece about a child, but in animal form. This child, this poor snail Donald, goes on this journey. An acorn falls from a tree and cracks his shell. So it literally, he has no house anymore. His house is broken. And he finds he goes around the garden. There's a storm. There's some real moments of mild mild terror in this book. But he finds a plant pot, and underneath the plant pot are all the other bugs who are ever so slightly different. So there's a spider that's only got 7 legs, and a fly whose wings are a bit gammy, and there's a slug who has similar slime issues to Donald. It's there's all those books. I could chat to you about books all day.
Sadly,
talk about my own.
Sadly, our time is coming to an end. If people want to get any of your books, my friend, where's the best place for them to go, Paul?
Here we go. Here comes the hard sell. Right. So if you head to pauljenkinspoet.co.uk, you will find links to all of the books. So we've got a bookshop there. I try as much as I can not to sell through the river-based company that we shall not speak of, because he's got enough money, quite frankly.
Yes.
And
not enough spaceships, apparently.
Well, yeah, exactly. If you can afford a spaceship, you don't need the commission on my book. So we sell through my website instead. But as well as that, that's also where you get any information if you want a schools visit, or you want to be able to, you're doing a celebration, you want a piece of poetry written. By all means, get in contact. Also, if you're doing a party and you need a DJ, I'm your man. So
Brilliant.
One of my other loves is music, and I absolutely adore. I used to do community radio, and I'm now doing sort of live events DJing, and it's just so nice doing parties, family do's, getting out there. And it comes through in the. I mean, you'll read in Bigger Than the Bullies that music comes through quite heavily. There's references to Oasis songs in there. There's references to a Fatboy Slim song that one of the characters loves all the way through. So it's there's little bits and pieces. You sneak your personal life into your writing as well.
You have been listening to the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast. Join Captain Dave and his co-pilot Eddie Edster, the well-being dog, on another Launchpad soon. Until then, always remember to be kind, be respectful, and most of all, dream, believe, and shine. Dogsthorpe Infant School is part of Hampton Academies Trust.